Good evening, YouTube. So it's been a little while since I've done a video. My voice is a little different tonight. I've been having some dental procedures occurring in my life over the last week, getting it done. So, per my usual, I kind of built up the gumption to get back online tonight, and I usually don't do videos unless I really feel it in my heart. Yeah, I mean, I could create a story around that, but there's more important things to talk about tonight. Needless to say, marketing and advertising, things like that, don't really drive my impetus for creating videos, and sometimes even that impetus to do so has cycles. I feel like since 2023, I've been watching the same movie play over and over again, like a Dark Night of the Soul, Groundhog Day reloaded, with Trump's actions and decisions, not that they're his own, but just that there's no integrity, there's no courage of moral conviction. Things are pretty sinister these days. Not that they weren't sinister on October 8th, 2023, when Israel disproportionately began their ethnic cleansing campaign on a higher scale than ever before. They've been doing it for a long time, mostly in secret to the rest of the world as far as it being publicized. So the cat's out of the bag and the bag is out of the cat. And a big part of this channel is ultimately focused around dissolving that apartheid manifestation and educating people. It's hard to know how things are going to evolve going forwards in social media. I think it has a life of its own, that circumstance rules, that the more you plan, the more evolution plans in an opposite direction oftentimes, because it's working on a different timeline with different elements that are not just around human business and human concerns. And the planet is falling apart. So there's a lot going on. And I've been questioning quite a bit, just in the sense of my day-to-day working, paying bills, creating bills, the artwork, energy put towards that, getting it out into the world, my channel here at Paradox House, feeling a bit burned out, I guess. It seems like the more the more you love, oftentimes, the more you attract drama, envy, suspicion, hatred, projections, transference. It triggers, it seems to trigger on a statistical level more backlash than batting of eyelashes. It's disconcerting, to say the least, but we press on. So tonight's going to be whatever surfaces, I feel. I watched a video by a YouTube channel called Mr. Squiggly, and it outlined a lot of early instances of Israeli war crimes, even crimes before Israel was even Israel, in the sense of the pre-planning through the Balfour Declaration. A few things I had learned, but had, I guess, gotten filed in the periphery of my memory, and they resurfaced in this documentary that he did. And I may do what's called a react video, although I'm not so much into, I guess, your normal idea of reaction. It's more of a respond video. So on that specific video that he did, because it was so well done, and I could tell that it was coming from his heart, that he's coming from a place of personal need to do the videos that he does, that it's not about having an egoic agenda. Of course, you can have an agenda without it being attached to your ego. So the ego is not a prerequisite to willing something to come into existence. So look him up. I'll do my best to remember to put a link in the description of his video. And yeah, tell me what you think. So a few thoughts came to me today, and possibly last night as well. Everything's kind of blurring together because the last couple weeks have been really intense work-wise, and yeah, just a hyper acceleration of my day-to-day. So sun goes up, sun goes down, sun comes back up, sun goes back down. It's all one straight line, in a sense. So here's the thought around Israel and religion. Now, this is going to be blasphemous, just to put that as a forewarning. If anyone is squeamish around blasphemy, you might want to find a different channel to watch. Blasphemy, heresy, whatever you want to call it, and yet these phrases have no real intelligence behind them. It's simply hyperbolic phraseology to deflect any constructive criticism around the cause and effect of religion. And so that's my point of view. I'm not necessarily speaking objectively, but the devil's in the details, and sometimes literally in the details. And the details I look at with any religion is the outcome of said religion, not its purpose, not its affirmations or its holy books, contents, because I look at religion more on a mass societal level than an individual level, because I'm not a religious person per se, at least not the religions of that build churches and mosques and interpret meanings for others. So here's my thought around Israel and the psychosis that 70 to 75% of its population seems to be under. And it all starts with Abraham, and it all starts with some dude writing on a piece of parchment his opinions and biases and his affirmations and pontifications. So if you want to understand the invention of the Judaic God, do some research. Judaism is not the first monotheistic religion on the planet. Zoroastrianism is older, and of course that was centered in Persia, modern day Iran, ironically enough. So here's some ideas in a proposal and some psychoanalysis or situational forensic observations. Religion is ultimately, in my point of view, an egoic projection of the patriarchy. Human-centric. That's probably not a word or a phrase, but I just put it out there. Rather than egocentric, it's human-centric, where it doubles back upon relating to oneself and one's relationships to the masculine and the feminine, mother and father. And it pushes buttons in human psychology, because those archetypes are inside one's feelings and said emotions, personal history. And so when you say, "Thy Father who art in heaven," it immediately pushes a lot of buttons. Thy pushes a personal contribution, and you start feeling internally. It's like a prompting. And then Father is whatever relationship you have recorded or memorized in your psychology. And then, of course, heaven is whatever you imagine it to be. So my proposal, or at least a thought around this, is take a deeper look at what religion does. Not the peripheral bake sales and contributions to the poor and the hospitals and sort of the decoration, because these things can be done by governments, bodies of science, by just ordinary everyday citizens that just want to do what's right and good. Doesn't have to have a religious banner attached to it. This is just simple human common sense that can build these support structures and institutions. Religion often takes the credit of what would be done anyway. So it often needs as much propping up as possible. And we know the hypocrisies of religion. So ultimately, I feel like in the future, religion will dissolve and be not necessarily replaced, but something more pragmatic and less argumentative will replace it. You've got the just plethora of arguments in religion and different denominational entities, and it's a mess. It's a lot of egos flexing and comparing and blaming and judging, and like the Sunnis and the Shias. It's like even there's an argument, there's a disconnect, although it's not enough that they worship the same God. They have to argue about how to worship and why that worship is not correct, and they vehemently oppose one another, and oftentimes secular bloodshed and massacres occur. To me, this is simply a product of religion, and I don't mean to use the word simply in devaluing or belittling the fact of tens of thousands have perished at the hands of one ego fighting another for dominance and control. Not that at all. I'm just saying that within that structure of that religion and Christianity as well, the Catholics and the Irish, for instance, and that whole situation. The Jewish, the Judaic, and the Catholics as well, and the Christians. Evangelical Christianity is ultimately anti-Semitic. So think about these things, if you dare. Think about how you can argue and say, well, the Bible says this, and yet within the Bible, there's ego battles and one religion belittling another and treating others differently than themselves, kind of a do as I say, not as I do situation. So to me, on a mass societal level, there's a corruption in the form of religion itself. So when you bring it down to a solo existential level, there's no argument. If you're just simply worshiping in your own way, you're not hurting anyone, you're not condemning anyone. You're simply doing what you feel is appropriate. So that I'm not arguing. And a lot of people will have a rebuttal and say, well, that's not true, and so on and so forth. But what they don't understand is that I'm not speaking about the individual. I'm speaking about the mass societal effect of the religion. The outcome, the deeds. And I think it's fair in that regards to question the religion on an individual level as well. Because for me, any religion that argues between denominations, worshiping techniques and who's a saint and who's not a saint and why and what for and how come, all that to me is a waste of my time. If I were to have the choice, I would choose to spend my time differently than to get involved in that habit or that routine of being, because it's been going on for thousands of years in just different forms. So for me, I let go of those things as a very young kid. I guess when I was presented with religion, and I was presented with it quite a few times in different ways. For me, I felt like I just saw right through it, that it was a hobby of sorts, and I already had a lot of my own personal stuff going on around my version of ritual and giving back and appreciating life, etc. I think the more of an individual you become, the less religious you become. I think in many ways, religion is a surrogate family for many, and something to be graduated up and out of, kind of like a nest. So it's a tool, not a weapon. And for many people, it's a weapon. And I'm not so sure that even if it's a tool, that it's not dangerous. It's like nailing a nail with a loaded gun. That's probably not a good idea. So my suggestion or a thought that came to me was, what about deifying something that is not humanly relatable, but could still be revered, like the planet, for instance, or the solar system and those planets, the elements, rather than humanizing angels and cherubs and seraphims and golems and jinn, humanizing morals and principles and ethics, the protection of children, the helping of the poor and the infirm, the elderly, housing, shelter, warmth, safety, food, health, mental health, physical health, emotional health. There's so much more the patriarchy can do than create something around heaven and hell that's out there. Ultimately, to me, the temple is the builder, not the thing that he's building, but the builder itself. And religion is very, very far away from this. I just saw that the Pope christened some sort of the world's largest church, and something came to me and said, well, the world's largest church for the shortest heart, because not once has the Pope really come out and condemned Israel for what it's doing in Gaza and Lebanon, and what it's doing in Iran. And the Catholic Church, they have their own itinerary around this stuff. And of course, they would be in competition with Judaism under the table. So again, more egoic stuff. And God is just a kind of reference point, a deflection point that they defer to when their personal shortcomings are revealed. This third party that cannot objectively speak for itself comes into play as a kind of coping mechanism, an excuse to do things right and wrong. So this, to me, that's very dangerous. This whole relying on God and some dudes or some ladies trusting that their voice or their inspiration is coming from having had a conversation with said God. All of it is very very much based on belief, asking no questions, having no real sincere critical factor operating in one's mind. It's ultimately a kind of dependent lifestyle, codependency, a kind of a toxic relationship in a sense. So I know there's going to be people who are going to rally against this video, and if you get through it, and that's fine. That's I guess in some ways what it's for as well, to stir things up a little bit and ask hard questions. I think ultimately with Judaism, someone, somewhere, sometime, self-ordained themselves as the chosen ones. And to me, that's already a red flag for a cult, because every cult, that's their first premise, is that they are the chosen ones and everyone else is doomed or not in the in crowd. And that claim has a life of its own. It's like creating an entity that has never existed before. And then that entity walks amongst people and it starts doing things and making things happen. And to me, I do believe ideas are life forms. And I won't go into a lot of detail around this, but as an example, I met a poem once. It was very peculiar, and it had things to say, other things to say than what the poem itself was. And it really made me think about the power of being in human form and the things that we do and the things we take for granted, and what might have a life of its own that we would never imagine actually does. So think about it like this. You declare yourself God's chosen people. Then what? Well, the ego takes it and runs. And ultimately it becomes a crutch. And it has become a crutch because there's an affluence around it. There's a privilege around it, a presumed higher than, better than, different than, while all along completely false. Nothing could be further from the truth. The more you think you're not like others, the more you are. In the sense of just human qualities, human rules and regulations. I don't mean on an existential level. And on an existential level, if you are different, you earned it. And it's not something egoic. It's something that just is what it is. But when it comes to religion, it's not about sobriety. It's about righteousness and defensiveness and heated arguments and blaming and shaming and justifying and lying and doing everything opposite of being a good person oftentimes. And Israel is a prime example of this. And the fact that many atheists were the early, quote, fathers of Israel, which I find kind of ironic. So it's food for thought. And to me, the easiest thing for me to have done, and I did do in the past, was completely not argue religion, because deep down, it's not for me. And I knew that, even as a child. And so why argue with something that you don't want to really have a conversation with? So it doesn't mean I can't study it and can't be critical of various things that I see. I don't need to become a biblical scholar to know right from wrong, or that something contradicts something else, or that a large portion of religion is anti-religious. So, but again, to simplify things, sometimes the easiest way to solve a problem is to avoid it, is to not give it any energy. And if you know in your heart of hearts that, oh, well, that's not for me, or that will never work for me, then you move on. You don't need to argue it. Now, you can give constructive criticism if asked, or you feel like it's necessary in order to reinforce a point to help others. But ultimately, there's no personal investment. Your ego is not involved. You're not getting pumped up, or you're not flexing or selling yourself. You're just simply doing a public service in a way. So I think, yes, a huge trouble started with claiming that you're the favorite. That right there is already self-exiling oneself from the human family, and that creates a trauma and a mindset that is basically a race to the bottom. And I'm boiling this down to just essential human psychology and emotions. That level of flagrant vanity and hubris has a life of its own. It has a destiny, and that destiny is not a beautiful, bountiful garden. In the primordial temple of the archetypes of every human being, no one, and I do mean no one, wants to be second place. Everyone wants to be first place, and everyone is fundamentally first place. So when you claim that you're first, that implies a second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, and so on. That already, that comparative math is already, it spells doom. It brings attention to oneself, and not the kind of attention that is healthy. And then, of course, came along Christianity, which is a competitive response to Judaism. And you've got Christ on the cross, and then that whole can of worms. And then came Islam and their whole situation. And within that triangle, kind of a Bermuda Triangle of sorts for an individual who's looking for something, is competitiveness. If you really look at the roots of those three religions, one is a response to the other, and they just go around and around. Christianity is a response to Judaism. Islam is a response to Judaism and Christianity, and they go around and around. Now, it would have been very different if all three were born at the same time. That would have been curious, but they weren't. And they're not the only religions that ever existed on the planet. There are many more, and that are older and perhaps more suited to your nature. So you might want to look into those. The universe is a big place. And this whole idea of one God, one way of doing things, to me, it's nonsense. You can't even have one God without having 30 versions of the same one. So that has to tell you something, that there is no success in, like, the religion itself is only successful within the individual practicing it as a solo private individual, in my opinion. Once it goes beyond the singular person and their private life, it loses all value. Because, again, with ethics, morals, principles, you can do and be religious by just being a good person. So religiousness can also just be a kind of self-expression of being a daughter or a son of Earth. Not to get too new age on you, but I'm just saying that on a primordial level, we can be beautiful and compassionate and amazing without being inspired by anything other than our desire to be such, and how it makes us feel afterwards, enduring. So to me, religion is just something that never really comes about. It just fiddles with itself. And it's an affirmation. It's a street sign. And worship your deeds, worship your work, worship the outcome of your day-to-day and your conscience. Let those be your saints and angels. Worship ethics and morals and principles and situational forensics and science and being truthful or calling someone out, having dignity, practicing your dignity, keeping boundaries. Learn how to be a better version of yourself if desired. Be a good friend, be a good listener. There's so many things that are in the archives of just the temple of you. And to me, when we project outward and make up, in my opinion, make up deities and saints and God and heaven and hell, it dispossesses the individual of a certain level of personal responsibility, and it distracts the personal individual to hold themselves accountable for these phenomenon when they are exiled outward and put up in the clouds far away out of reach. What if those things are hiding inside you and not being paid attention because you're looking through a telescope at something that's standing right behind you? Something to think about. So that's the bugle, saying that I'm heading into Sandman land, and I thank you. It's been a while. I appreciate your support on this channel, and there will be more videos coming. I just need to get over this hump, and I'm working on it. And so, much respect to all pro-Palestinian activists out there. Much love and compassion to all the detainees, that are thousands, that are being illegally held in Israeli prisons. My heart is very heavy for you, and I wish I could do more. And it feels like a little piece of me dies in a way, because I can't. I don't have the power to free you, to save you. I don't know what it's all for. It makes no sense. Because certainly the price is the price exceeds anything that the earth or materialism could ever give. And all my sympathies and compassion to Lebanon, Iran, Yemen, into Gaza, the West Bank, to all those that are suffering, not just in the Middle East, but I focus on the Middle East for now. Thank you and good night.